Hey guys, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are today. My name is Jason Flame, and I am the host of the Master Motivation Podcast. I am very excited to have another great guest today. Let me introduce her to you right away. This is Carlee Wolfe, who is a dynamic leadership executive with over 20 years of experience shaping high-performing, resilient cultures inside global organizations. As Associate Vice President of Leader Development and Organizational Effectiveness at Hyatt Hotels, she operates at the intersection of leadership, talent, strategy, and culture on a global scale. Beyond the corporate world, Carlee brings a powerful perspective from decades of coaching volleyball and serving in the Olympic and Paralympic adaptive sports community, where performance, inclusion, and trust are everything. Passionate about developing leaders who can thrive in complexity, she is dedicated to helping people lead with humanity and turn differences into a competitive advantage. Carlee, welcome to our show, and thank you so much for making the time to be with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super. One, I was excited to be here, and then you listen to your song and your intro, and it's like, all right, let's go. We have a lot.
That's it. You got to get pumped up. Got to get pumped up. Got to have an entrance song. You know, that's just the pro wrestler in me. But you know, we had an amazing conversation several weeks ago as we were preparing for the show, and we just kind of hit it off. Talked a lot about a lot of very cool things, and I'm excited to share your story and share your experience. And for those that are watching live, do us a favor, like, share, and comment as we're going along. If there's something that you would like to ask Carlee or hear from her, please place that in the comment. And don't forget to go to YouTube and subscribe to Master Motivation Podcast. So, Carlee, just give us, a little bit more insight. I read a little bit about your bio, but that doesn't tell us enough about you. I know that there's a whole lot more, so please add to that.
Yeah, a couple things to add. I've spent my 20+ year career in HR doing people work, which you highlighted. The other thing you touched on, which I'll share a little bit more on, is adaptive sports. So for those that are unfamiliar, where I've played a lot is in the Paralympic side. So this is the major competition that runs parallel with the Olympics. That's why it's called Paralympics. And for sitting volleyball, suggest like a quick YouTube check on that to check out the sport, but really competitive sport, fun sport, and has also opened up opportunities for me in places like where I live, which is Baltimore. And that's the other part of adaptive sports I do, which is I work with an organization called Kennedy Krieger Institute. And on the weekends, this is what I always tell people, I show up, I do what Jerry and Gwenna tell me. Those are the two that run the programs, who are just amazing. But largely that looks like things like wheelchair basketball, bocce, pickleball, softball, anything in an adaptive arena. And these are young kids just looking to be competitive and connect like we all do. And so that's a little bit more on the sport angle. And the last thing I'll share, I'm just very passionate about future of work, right? There's a lot of disruption happening in our workplaces as well as communities through AI. Some of it real, some of it just emerging, but causing fear. And so how are people thinking about it? How are they leaning in? And of course, my question is, how can I help? So those are just like a couple other, maybe we'll call them fun fact ads. But I think that you covered a good amount of stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'm sure we'll get into that. You know, regarding AI, there's a lot of fear of what's going on, and how is that affecting the workplace, and how is that affecting just everything going on in our world. With the inception of social media, well, now it's been many years that social media, but it seems like things are just continuing to evolve and continuing to change as they always have. And I think if we educate ourselves and we learn how to use it properly, it's going to be a great tool for us. But there's also the downside. We can talk about the downside of social media just as much as we can the positive side. But what I really love, what I was excited about, just in the sports world, and just the inclusion of adaptive sports, and you mentioned kids just want to fit in. They just want to be a part of it. That whether they're in a wheelchair or other challenges, they watch all their friends out there playing and doing stuff, and what a great way to get involved in your community too, by diving into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that's like really important to me in having these conversations is that, one, I think we can all recognize kids, like we were once kids, or we have kids down the block. and everyone just wants to like play and engage. I love watching kids just literally run around the neighborhood because as adults, like where do we run? We run nowhere. Like it was like, hey, listen, you come look at this thing down the hall. You're like not running. The kids run everywhere, and I think it just speaks to the energy, the exploration, the freedom in life. Obviously, like different set of bodies than we do as we have as adults, but I think more the spirit of right, like getting out and enjoying. And that includes sports. Like sports is about play. It's not really at the younger age is about fitness. It's about play and connection and being a part of something. And so it's not only about going back to why do I love talking about this is one is how do we create spaces where all kids can participate, but also there's places where all kids can participate because it's just a matter of shifting the mindset of the sport and the game that they're playing. I always use like wheelchair basketball as an example. Kids love like get now there's access to chairs, so we'll assume everyone has chairs. By the way, there's organizations that enable that, but what kid doesn't want to get in a chair and like learn that sport? So you don't have to always just create the system around the one person. The system can just tweak a little bit to be inclusive of everybody, and everyone has a good time. So I also am a big fan of this topic because it's hopefully it opens up different perspectives of where people can engage in whole and not just have to like find what feels like sometimes a niche.
Yeah. Well, I've been in the fitness sports world, I guess, through martial arts for over 3 decades. I started martial arts in 1985, and as I became an instructor, there were all kinds of times where even adults would say, well, I don't think I could do karate because I'm older or I'm out of shape or, whatever it is. They have their limitations. And then I actually had the opportunity, I was able to teach a blind student, which was talk about changing perspective on, how you teach and what we do. I mean, this is martial arts, right? How do we teach a blind student to do martial arts? But, we found a way, and this guy he changed me big time in the way that I reach students. I've had students that have been in wheelchairs, and right now I actually have a parent with a child who is training, but they also have another child who is in a wheelchair and very very limited in capacity to what they can do at all, both mentally and physically. And I just asked them like one day because they brought him to the lesson when the child first started, their brother started. And I said, have you ever thought about letting them try martial arts? They're like, he could never do it. And I'm like, I'd love to give it a try. Anytime you're ready, I'd love to give it a try. And I'm always looking for those opportunities to break down those barriers of limitations, whether you're older or out of shape or, confined to a wheelchair, blind, whatever it is. Like, I mean, I believe in the benefits of martial arts or sports as it builds confidence and discipline and just having that fun, like you said. I would love to be able to give that to everybody.
And yes, and like what I love about that too is like you're asking the questions, like you're looking for that, and so for people to even just have that, to open up that question of like, how can I be more inclusive? Like, who else? How about this? Who else needs to be here? Because again, if it's that's why like I love sport because it is this total, first of all, like even playing field in a lot of ways. It's like a relatable experience, and by the way, that's both good and bad because I think what you and I are talking about a little bit is about like inclusion and access and how can people play. We'll use that term, and I think that in life, right, whether it's adults or kids, we all have those moments of not feeling like a part of something, and sport is absolutely one of those things. It is a game. It is literally the game. The idea of winning at sport is to play the game. And so part of that game is asking how we can get more people on the court. And I'll just give like another example too, just to open it up. Like when I was growing up, I really wanted to play softball. They hadn't started a softball program in our neighborhood yet, and so played baseball. Like that's what I had to do. But in that case, now I was young enough. My mom sought it out, very very supportive. But also, imagine if the park district was like, well, actually, it can only just be for boys. And at that time, I think it was even like T-ball. Like everyone is like at the same place. Like I wasn't holding anyone back. There wasn't any impact on anything. And so it's even spaces like that. I think it's just more like, how do we get more kids on the field? Because it's just so important for skill development, for fitness, for inclusion, being a part of something. So I love that you did that for that athlete. And I think that could be replicated in so many different ways.
I agree. I agree. Well, let's talk a little bit about, developing leaders. You've spent over 20 years developing leaders. What's one leadership trait you believe is most misunderstood today?
Mm. Okay, well, one, I was, so I think, well, leadership trait that's misunderstood. I was just going on the energy of two of the sport and inclusion, and I think that that's like a misunderstood thing of what does inclusion and leadership mean. And I think for me right now, where I've been circling around is like this concept of community, and perhaps to your question of like misnomer or misunderstanding is sometimes I think we believe in performances like, hey, Jason, you have to do these things and you can independently do, and sometimes working with others might slow you down, or it's really hard to have shared goals. And I think the sense of like, how do we build culture around like lifting everyone up, I think that right now at work is so critical, because people are they're have so much on their plate, so their capacity is just totally drained. Organizations are demanding more of folks, and so sometimes it's one of those things like the mound of work will actually never end. We're drawing upon a time where new skills need to be developed, and at a pace of which literally not one person could own all those skills. And so being able to build culture around community, I think is a differentiator right now, and also is a maybe something that gets misunderstood because it can at surface level can feel like oh, this just feels good, like, oh, we should just be here together. But I'm talking about is engagement and performance, and doing that through sense of community.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Again, as a martial arts school owner, this is my only career. I've never worked in the corporate world at all. I've never had to be part of another team, and I've never only a few years out of my career did I actually teach for someone else. Right? I started. And in the martial arts world, things are it's a very unique culture, if you will, and the community, and that's what I really did love about it, because it feels like this family. And as instructors, we have this common goal of helping raise our students up and help bring the best out of them.
Yeah.
And but like a karate school, typically a karate instructor is going to work like 4 to 6 hours a day. Like, they don't have this 8 to 10, 12 hour grind. And, the deadlines it's just, in my opinion, it's so different. So it's hard for me to understand, where there's like this breakdown of culture and community, because we're sparring together, we're training together, we're teaching together, like everything we do is together. And so, what you're saying is that leadership challenge is being able to come together. Maybe I think more people should do martial arts, and that can help people in the corporate world. I don't know.
But no, well, yes, I think they should do more martial arts. Maybe and if they're near you, they should visit you specifically. But I think, as a side note, this is like an entry to like, I love using sports as a metaphor to teach leadership. And when I started my career, I worked at the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and we would actually run programs and use sport to like bring out concepts. So, for example, leveraging strengths, we went down to the dojo and we did judo, because in judo, depending on the size you are, like short, tall, larger, smaller, you leverage your literal levers of your body in different ways to have your competitive edge. And so then the question was like, how does this translate back to work? Like, how are you leveraging your strengths to perform differently? What about that of your team? And so you're asking me a good one, because I'm very passionate about it. Yes, they should get involved in sport and think about sport in that capacity, because what you're highlighting is you have the removal of, I'm going to call it like the corporate noise, right? You have an objective, which is on that mat, and you're going to martial arts me on this one, like make sure I'm like saying it right, but like you're there like with an objective in mind, whether it's, well, to win, to learn a skill, and there's a life enters, but almost like a permission to be in the sport in the moment. At work, we have, or corporate world, there's like all these distract meetings, politics, oh, this announcement just came through. What's a layoff? Like, there's just things that are happening around the distractions, which then create sort of like questions in people's minds. And this is where then, when I say questions, it's like, well, am I losing my job? Are they losing their job? What do I need to do to get better? Because actually, right now, I'm not feeling comfortable. So I'm going to stay in my box, because if I perform well, then it's mattered to me, versus like, how do I lift with others? So these are the things that then start to erode into to the point you're bringing up is, how does it happen? This is it. Like, this is what happened. It's an environmental like influence on the purity of how can I do my job and how can I do it well with others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what I don't want to lose sight of is I do think that a lot of leaders have positive intent in building community or connection or team. I also just think there's a lot of challenges in an organization for people to have time and capacity to do that. And so that's where I want to tie it back to your gym. You have a mission. Your mission is your gym, and I would imagine gym culture and the athletes that you're working with. Um, and I think that that's what leaders in corporations aspire to. But again, there's just a lot of demands on their shoulders that takes away from that. So I think that that's why it's elusive, right? Like team, build team. Well, like, when am I
Mm-hmm.
going to how are we going to do that under these conditions? That's what happens.
Well, and I mean, it goes without saying, I think, that ego plays a huge part in all of that as well. When you have a leader at the top that is all about everybody helping to push them up rather than that person reaching down to pull everybody up to their level, now that's something that I can talk about in the martial arts industry that you see
Yeah.
a lot of. You see a lot of ego, and you talked about the politics and things of that sort. Um, but ego just kind of gets in the way when we're only focused on me, and it's not really even like I have to think about you all the time. It's like, how can you and I work together? How does 1 + 1 = 3? That type of thing. Like, how do we come together on that? And one of the things that I really love again about my team is we do a lot of things where we role play, or we talk about situations, and we plan out our attack. I mean, martial arts has a built-in goal system, right? You come to class, you earn stripes, you earn belts, you work your way towards black belt. It's like very, very straight. I mean, it's not. There's no way around that system. But in life and in the corporate world, it's not always just like climbing that ladder, so to speak,
Yeah.
because it goes like all over the place. Someone leaves in the middle of our climb, and it's like, oh well, now we're back to square one. Or things change, things happen, right?
Yep. Oh, for sure. And I love this. I need to like bake this into my like career conversations, because I think there's a whole like tension around careers, and maybe being like how you're describing is right, not just outcome in the gym or in the practice, but like the different levels that you're going at and what that looks like. And I think about that for career. I think a lot of people want like step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like clearly defined, in an organization that's going to then put them in the gym to achieve those different levels. And I think sometimes, and this is like the interesting contracting in well, maybe we'll just call it like corporate work, is the sense of maybe someone says there's levels, and then you start your job and you're like, all right, who's got those stripes that I've been looking for? And they're like, stripes? Oh, you got sold on stripes. We don't have stripes here. We're doing circles around here. And you're lucky if you're going to get a circle. And you're like, what is happening? And so I think the contracting that you have around career, but also what happens when how do you navigate that, right? I think is also what comes up, because to your point, so much changes. And so even when stripes are committed, the business changes, your leader, as you just said, your leader changes, although metaphorically similar. You're kind of like, all right, what are we doing? Or no, you were metaphoring me on, right, you lose someone, and so where do you go? But I think
Yeah.
that's where people have opportunity. We're talking about leadership. I think that's where self-leadership comes into play. Okay, I was committed stripes, but they're not here. But my aspirations haven't changed. I want to continue to develop these skills. I want to lead a team. How are you starting to take those things on for yourself so that you
Mm-hmm.
continue to achieve the things that you want, stay fulfilled in the areas that are important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Hyatt, since we're talking about corporate. You work at the intersection of leadership, talent, and culture. What does it actually look like behind the scenes on a daily basis?
Ooh, daily basis. Very good question. You've been wanting to learn about corporate. We're about to get into it. No, I'm just kidding. I was like, 8 a.m. meeting, 8:30. No, I think so. Here's what my role. Yeah,
No.
I know exactly. Because I work globally, myself and our team works globally. The best way to put it is we kind of like actually help inform or build the systems in which people can develop and grow in their careers. So what does that look like? You heard me mention leadership development. Our team does things like, what is leadership what is good leadership at Hyatt? Let's define what that is. So here are some competencies of what that looks like. And then within those competencies, we do things like we'll help run different assessments that leaders might go through. So for example, a common business assessment that people might be aware of is a 360. So Jason, you're going to go through a 360. What that means is you get feedback from all around you. So if I report to you. So you're going to take the assessment. I'm going to take the assessment. Your peers are going to take the assessment. People around you who are stakeholders are going to take the assessment. And this gives you coin the phrase, 360-degree feedback view of how you're performing. And what's great about that is because you filled it out, you might be able to understand blind spots that you have. It helps identify the things that you want to lean into for development. So I'm honing in on this example because it feels very performance driven and I think relatable to sport. In sport, you get feedback all the time, or you should be from your coach, video feedback, verbal feedback, photos. Like this is maybe the corporate version of that. But if I were to pull it back out, what does that mean to do that work at scale? For me and our team, that's saying, okay, like what type of 360 are we wanting to run? Who do we want to partner with to get that built? And then how do we get that out to the organization? So of the 110,000 employees that are under our Hyatt umbrella for our employee focus, if we're thinking about leaders, how do they actually access the tools, get what they need, get the coaching that they need behind that? So day in the life, no, joking aside, there are a lot of meetings, but I'm just giving you an example of like, what do I do? It's about enablement. So it's building strategies and systems and tools that can go out to the masses so that they can either pull it off the shelf, they can experience it, or it's embedded in how they work to help make them better and to help continue to make this a good place to work.
Now, you talked about enablement. What would you say is the difference between enablement and empowerment?
This is a really good question. I think enabling is maybe a mechanism in which you can provide, offer, and so that's maybe not to say someone has to take or use, but to put it out there. I think empowerment feels a lot like maybe an offer or a share, but that someone can take for themselves. Like it's sort of like an inner ownership, where maybe enablement's more of like an outer ownership that people can take in, and empowerment is like an inner ownership people can take in. Okay. And now I'm like very tempted to quickly Google what both of these words mean, what they are, like not scientific, like English wise.
Yeah. Well, it's just,
but I'm curious.
Well, so a lot of people talk about empowerment. We empower, like in martial arts, we empower people to feel safer and stronger through teaching them self-defense or getting in shape, but you use the word enable. And to me, I was like, okay, well, so you provide the opportunity for growth through skills training, opportunities, and then empowerment would be the support that would go along with that. That was just why I asked the question, because I wanted to kind of get your take on that, because I was thinking enabling was providing the opportunity, empowering would be supporting the opportunity in one way or another.
I like that.
And then you talked about blind spots, right? This is a topic for leaders. I read a lot of John Maxwell. I love John Maxwell books and just all of his leadership lessons. And it's hard for leaders to, we don't see our own blind spots. So we have to have our peers or subordinates or our leaders, kind of shine that light on our blind spots. How do you help people to see their blind spots?
So I think I'll give you like a systems example of how that happens, but I think I'm going to go to more of like a one-on-one example, which is what does coaching look like at work? And I think that it is about curiosity and questions, right? So if I'm working with someone and like, let's just talk about maybe they've been facilitating meetings. The people in the meetings are having a hard time understanding the purpose of the meetings and what their role is. There's coaching as in I see what's happening and I can pull you aside. I'll use like gym analogy, right? Pull you aside, like have a conversation, be like, hey, it looks like people are lost. You might want to think about that. Here's how I think how you might want to consider shifting the room. I call that more sort of like advising, mentoring, like in the corporate sense, but coaching also being reflective. So, for example, like Jason, how do you think that meeting went? Oh, I thought it went well. There were a few like things that maybe I saw like a couple of like wandering eyes or curiosities and wasn't sure about that, but I think everyone was good. I could say like, oh, I'm glad that you noticed that because I was wondering if they were lost myself, and I'm wondering like how do you take temperature in that moment to actually know if they're lost or if they're on point with you? Because what I heard you say is you felt like, oh, they'll be okay. How did you know that? And then they might say, well, I just know. Or they might say, oh, good question. I don't know. I didn't ask. That was assumed. And you're like, okay, well, how might you go about that next time? All right. You and I just did like a very quick sort of like discovery question. But I think coaching is also that like reflective of how to pull out those potential blind spots because you're in it. The questions help open up the aperture for possibility of something else.
Yep.
And so that's how I would kind of frame that.
Yeah, awesome. Good stuff. Speaking of questions, we got a few people here watching live. If you're watching live, would love to hear your questions, your thoughts, anything that you would like to hear from Carlee. So please feel free, drop those in the comments, and I'll throw it up here on the screen so we can ask Carlee. But let's go. Let's talk a little bit more about when you walk into an organization. What are the first signs that tell you whether the culture is truly healthy or just looks good on the surface? You mentioned this a little bit before.
Okay, well, I think we've all been to those places. Like, think of I'm just gonna use it because we're in service and hospitality. Think of like a hotel, a restaurant, a facility that you've been in, and you're so excited to be there, and you walk in, and all of a sudden you just kind of look around. You're looking and thinking, when's the last time they cleaned this place? Or you go to check in, or you go get your ticket checked. Maybe you're going to a concert, and the person's like, what do you want? I'm like, okay, I'm just here to have a good time. Like, this is what I came to do. I think I'm exaggerating. We've all had these experiences, but from a workplace, like, I think these are similar, right? People take care of the spaces in which they occupy. People care and support one another. There is a respect that happens in the space. And so I think those are the things that you can pick up on as a person as a human who connects with other humans and is always aware of their surroundings. And I don't mean you as in you or me. I just mean all of us are humans moving in the world, and you can sense these things. Sometimes people do just have bad days, but I think when you see that consistently across, I think that those are some of the signals for sure.
Yeah, this made me, you were talking about, kind of like appearance and how you feel when you walk in a room. So it made me think of when I had a guest instructor come to my school, Dave Kovar, one of our, leaders in the industry of martial arts, just an amazing martial artist, but a great businessman and an amazing human. But he came to our school to do a leadership training. And, in the martial arts world, typically you walk into martial arts school and it's kind of like got a little sweat smell, you kind of got targets laying on the ground here, there, chairs maybe. Anyway, he walks in the school and he always does like kind of a little video when he comes into the school and like posts it out to his audience. And he does this video and he asked me like point blank, like on the video, "Hey, Master Lam, how you doing? Thanks for having me coming to school." He's all, "I'm looking around like your school is so clean and it smells so good. How do you make that happen?" And like I was kind of stumped for a second because I didn't know how to answer it. And I'm like, I know that other martial arts schools are not like that, but like, why are you surprised? Like why are you so surprised that it smells so good? And so it was just kind of a proud moment for me, actually. And I kind of brag about it a lot to, and brag on my team because like, I'm not always the one that cleans the school or makes it smell good. Like they're the ones that take care of it. And I'm like, that's so cool. That's so cool that like someone that's so high up, like walked in our school and thought that it looked and smelled good. And in our team meeting on Monday, I was just talking about how people feel when they walk in the door. Are we greeting them immediately? Are we excited that they're there, or are we just like kind of like you kind of did the what, like, hey, Like you're here today, cool. Like you're supposed
Yeah.
to be here. But instead of like, hey, I'm so excited to see you, and be welcoming. And I look over at my parent area, and are they on their phones or are they engaged watching the class? Things like that. And I just think that, that is such an important, you want to, and by the way, I also part own a restaurant that's right near our school. So I'm kind of thinking of a lot of the same things that you were saying, within the martial arts school, also
Yeah.
over at the restaurant. But we've all been there where we've walked into a situation where we're just like, do they even care about this place? Do they take any pride? Because if they don't take any pride in how it looks or feels or smells, are they going to take pride in me as a customer and take
Yeah.
care of me while I'm here? So how do you encourage that? What are ways that, like, in your world, that you encourage that? And I know it's all about the training.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'll answer that. One thing I wanted to touch on, because you mentioned like restaurants, and I think that sometimes culture gets this like could feel really really soft for people, and like, why does it matter? And so when you ask me like, how can you tell? Like, let's think about the things that we just said, and let's cut to a restaurant as an example. If people care about it and they take care of it, it's also clean and it's timely and it's delivers on what's expected. And if it's not, it's what is it? It's dirty and you don't get what's expected. Who wants to eat at a place like that? And so it directly ties to performance, which is your business. So if I'm running a restaurant, my culture isn't set around cleanliness and timeliness. Let's just go with those two things. That's going to impact the food, and that's going to impact people being there, which impacts the revenue. So this is where culture moves out of the soft space and into the real translatable like performance. And so you asked like, how do you do that? How do you do that? I think you've given some great examples, like even in the context of your gym, but I'm just going to start with like, it's about one, setting the tone of like, what is the culture? What do we value here? And what are we going to pay attention to? What are the things we're going to, the phrase of inspect what you expect. So if I want a clean restaurant, then I'm going to go around and inspect like quite regularly. Like, what does the end of the shift look like? What does the busy time look like? What does it look like when it's quiet and people aren't here? But also the dynamic of which, what do we expect of others and how we engage? And so if it's one of those things of we want to be clean, you want to be like, okay, we want to have a clean restaurant and we want to be able to do that together so everyone understands their role. Because if you're not setting that expectation, then people are like, that's it. I'm going to go, I'm cleaning, not you. This is my space.
Right.
So in other words, set the tone. What is the culture that you want? And what are you, inspect what you expect. There's a classic thing, I always love talking about this, which is culture evolves and is created whether you pay attention to it or not. You want to be the leader that's paying attention to it, because if you're not, then you're creating cultures and impacts and performance that is in not intended. And those happen to be some of the cultures that we referenced earlier. So I think that's a big part of it. You mentioned training, so it's like skills. But I also think it's about understanding outcomes, right? What is the organization goals? What's the team goals? What are my goals? And how are we collectively working towards that, measuring that? So these are just like a couple of things, but at the end of the day, to me, it comes down to culture, it comes down to leadership, and it comes down to clarity. And I think with those three things, depending on what business you're in, including that of sport or a large organization, if you're asking yourself those questions of what should sit in those categories and how do you inspect what you expect, I think culture is an outcome of that.
Absolutely.
And I know we have a question, so.
Well, yeah, just a comment actually. And Dallas, thanks for jumping on and watching today. Hope you got your workout in. I'm getting ready to go to the gym in a little bit. Wondering how you're doing, Dallas, by the way, how you're doing on your deadlifts, because I know you were charging it pretty hard and getting up there. So he says, how you do anything is how you do everything. A clean studio, clean fundamentals, high level classes. I personally agree with that statement. How you do anything is how you do everything. I've actually heard a couple people lately kind of try to debunk this theory, but I really believe that. I think that, like, I'm the type of person that I wake up in the morning and I have a hygiene routine, and I always tell myself that if I look good, I feel good, and I'm gonna perform better. And so how you do anything is how you do everything. How you do your martial arts technique is how you're going to do your homework at school. How you take pride in what you're doing. And that's awesome, Dallas, hitting it hard, going for 405. Get it? I can't wait to hear or see the video when you do that. That's an awesome 405 on deadlift is an awesome feat. But I find myself like I walk around my school like crazy. Like I've seen a lot of like memes and funny videos lately on the martial artist that's picking up all the water bottles in our school or in our gym. And like I'm constantly walking around, and cleaning up. But also, like I think my staff kind of picks up on that because they also do it when I'm not there. I just can't help it. But how do you in the corporate world and even in small businesses, because people say that nobody cares about your business as much as you do as a small business owner. And I don't always agree with that because when it comes to vision and clarity and culture and all those things, if that is, if that's laid out, like I think everybody falls in line with that. But how do you create or how do you, get someone to take pride in their work, especially in this day and age? Like I think that there's some questions of people taking pride in their work. How do we encourage that more?
Yeah, I think one of it's doing what we say and say what we do. So I think if you're expecting people to have, let's just keep with this like clean space, then you need to keep it clean as well, right? You just mentioned like the school, but I think of the gym or a workplace, or if I'm telling my team to keep things clean and I'm the one leaving the trash out, like what does that say of what we expect, and how I value that? Because clearly I don't value that. My actions are not speaking or not translating to my words. And so I think it's just, Jason, I hate to boil it down to something as simple as that of like, do what you say and say what you mean. But I think a lot of it is that. I think it happens from corporations at a company level. For example, I use this all the time around employee engagement. If you're going to take an employee engagement survey, which is to understand where the company's doing things well and where they're not doing them well. And a lot of organizations will, and comes from like my consulting days and working in a lot of different places. Sometimes they're like, well, we don't really want to talk about the bad. And you're like, well, they already know that it's bad. So like, why would you ignore it? Why did you ask them? And not do something about it. So what does that send to people? You say that you care, but really do you? Because it seems like you haven't addressed anything that is actually in my way. And so that's just an example of that at scale. But then there's the stuff I brought up, the cleanliness example, which is like, here's what I value, but do I value because I'm not doing it? I think this shows up, by the way, very relatable to sport. I have expectations of performance. Well, am I letting that slide? Am I letting other people like, I'll use it to not get away with things, but sort of like, they're not meeting expectations. Am I letting that happen? And what about my overachiever and overperformer or high performer? Am I rewarding them? These are all very like big, seems like simple concepts as you and I are chatting, but these are the things that one happen every single day, which is why you need to prioritize and understand the culture and the team that you're trying to build. And two, and then stick with those things and reinforce it in every interaction, moment, etc. What was the quote? How you do anything is how you do everything. So if you're going to pick anything within, or if you're going to pick something, it's not even anything. We're talking about pick something. Then you should deliver on that in all ways. So that's how I would do that.
I love your example about, asking for feedback and then doing nothing with it or nothing about it. It's always surprising to me that in my industry, in the martial arts industry, that schools are afraid to ask their students for their thoughts on how things are going, and I don't always put out necessarily a survey, but I am constantly reaching out to my parents, like, how are you doing? Or how is your child doing? And tell me a little bit about their, success or challenges over the last couple weeks or couple months. I feel this all feeds into, the culture of our business and the culture of our school and the opportunity for success. Sometimes people just don't want to hear, they're afraid to hear the bad news. It's kind of like in a sale. If you don't ask for the sale, the answer is always no. And people don't ask because they're afraid of the no. But I think that there's so many different ways that we can do this in different businesses and different industries. But if you're not doing anything with that feedback, then you've asked them the question, you've asked for their feedback, and then you've done nothing about it. Now they're feeling lukewarm about the product or lukewarm about, your service that you're providing.
For sure. And there's ways like, maybe we're walking around this, which is also like maybe people are afraid of what they're going to hear. I think you mentioned this, and there's ways to work through that. Like you don't have to just also ask like, well, what's your feedback, right? You could say, and I'll use a work standpoint. I've been working on communicating more effectively, like specifically as company updates come through. I want to make sure I'm sharing that with my team. Well, then maybe I can just ask my team that, hey, I've been working on company updates. Do you feel like that's been connecting more with you lately? No? Okay, what else can I do to help with that? So I think also understanding what are you trying to gain from the feedback so that then you can hear it in a way that provides you the value that you were seeking in the first place. And I think that that's true of so many other things. I think that's true of goal setting. I think that's true of coaching. We're talking about feedback in this example. Get clear on what it is that you're trying to do and how you're doing it, and then this should give you freedom. Back to our feedback example, to ask for feedback because you're narrowing it into something you're already focused on.
Yeah. And this transcends across the board, not just with
Yeah.
our students or clients or customers, but also within your own team and within your organization. I mean, I talk about communication. I feel like sometimes I'm an over communicator, but I like to ask my team, like, hey, am I being clear enough on whether it's an expectation or the system that we're going to run for this next event or this new policy that we're, because I want to make sure that I'm being clear enough to my team so that they can now pass that information down to our students. But it comes down to like communication and being able to be open to going back to the blind spots. Some people, this is a huge blind spot for them. That like feedback is not, it's like, I'm going to do it the way that I've always done it. And that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
And you could be forcing, a square peg in a round hole all you want. And it's just, it's only going to get you so far. But, we talked a lot about this topic and, we talked about, corporate, non-traditional environments. How has coaching volleyball and working in adaptive sports shaped the way that you develop leaders?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've probably heard some of that today, like and you're inspiring this, like the Tago in sport and performance. But I think for me, it's the continual questioning of myself and how I think about not just leading, but the products, services, enabling resources that we provide to organizations, and ask myself, like, is this the most effective way we could have done that? Like, are we really like solving for this performance problem or need through this solution that we've made? And I think that in the context of work, like I said, there could be like a lot of noise that sits around in these corporate environments. Whereas like when you're in sport, like you're in it, like you're shooting that basket, you're making that roll, whatever it may be. And so the idea of what is performance, how do we support performance, is baked into the nature of the outcomes of sport. So for me, that's like a big part of it. How do I just continue to keep it simple around performance, around leadership, and around culture? These things are great. They work they're needed in both spaces. They just show up and are challenged in different ways. But I think again, sometimes in work context, we get caught up, and some of it's like rightfully so. Like there are dynamics in work that also facilitate that, but that's one thing. I think the other thing for me is also the power of like relationships and teammate. Volleyball is a very, very much a team sport, not just like literally you're playing with other folks, but I think it's the way I learned this a long, long time ago. Volleyball is a basically a game of mistakes, right? You're trying to, like, if you think about people like falling on the ground, there's a bad pass. You're bettering the ball is the other way of putting it. Each touch that an athlete has, you're bettering that ball. So for example, if I gave you a bad pass or an off pass, Jason, your bettering is the set that you're going to then give to the hitter. And so that whole notion for me is also cuts over into work. Like we can all serve each other in better ways. We can better the ball for one another, better about the ball for the team. So that's another thing that's cut over for me. And then the last thing is, just because I have the context of the gym, sometimes it just helps me break down things in simple ways. As of recently, I'll just give this example. As a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the difference between development and performance. And can a development outcome go into a performance outcome? So I'll give this to you in sports words. I was using volleyball. I said, when I coach volleyball and we're working on something developmental, it is expected that there are errors. and we learn from those errors. So a development outcome or focus might be sound something like that you're balancing getting the skill accurate versus like the outcome of that skill accurate. So that might be like I'm setting the ball to in performance, setting the ball to a particular place. In development, it might be I'm just watching that my hands are moving in a certain way. And that shows up at work too. Well, what are you rewarding people for? Is it for how they're developing or how they're performing? And we were struggling this, and I said this. I was like, okay, in the gym, if we're working on development, it's very clear. But as soon as I say, okay, we're working on development, but this is actually also going to be the tryout for the team. Development's out the window. No one's wanting to make mistakes. Why would I want to make mistakes when you're judging my performance and my performance outcomes to make a team? So, just another one that has played in is recent as a few weeks ago, the volleyball metaphor.
Well, and everything you're saying applies in my world in the martial arts, because as I was teaching a sparring class last night, we were working on developing skills skills in order to perform better. So we're developing, hand-eye coordination. We're developing, kind of working on a combination. We're working on blocking a low kick, blocking a middle kick, blocking a high kick, and we're practicing and practicing and practicing. And yeah, there's going to be mistakes, and sometimes the mistakes are what teach us, the failure teaches us more than getting it right every single time. And so we're doing the drill. And I could tell after about a minute, 90 seconds, really, people are like, okay, I've done this dozens of times. So I'm like, okay, well, let's switch, and let's do a middle kick instead of the low kick. And I could see like, okay, we're kind of like, and I'm telling them guys, like, look, we could literally do this all class. We could do this for an hour, and, and you're still going to have some mistakes and mess up or whatever. And then finally we get done doing the drills, and I'm like, okay, it's time to spar. I'm like, so try to keep in mind what we were working on in the drills as you spar. And of course, like all of a sudden, like everything kind of goes out the window, because now I'm a little bit more hesitant because they're really trying to like hit me hard or whatever. And it's like, I don't want to try that because I don't feel good. And I stop and I go, guys, this is why we drill. I said, you got to drill so many times for that. You're going to drill hundreds or thousands of times for the one time you need to get it right. And I said, so you just got to kind of let your body just adopt these skills. So 100% agree with that. I want to go back for a second, because, I mentioned this is the way we've always done it. It's like the killer phrase that I cannot ever accept or handle. And in martial arts, we constantly talk about, trying to remain humble and being a white belt and always having that learning mindset. And so that's, to me, that's like the opposite of this is how we've always done it. Because, as a white belt, you don't know anything. You don't know any better. You're always open to something new. In your workplace and in your world, how do you find yourself as a constant learner, or, being that person that's always looking for new ways to adopt or adapt new methods for teaching? Because, I'm sure that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the way you taught leadership is different than what you're doing now. So how have you taken that, in my terms, white belt mentality and become a life learner?
For sure. Yes. I love everything. First of all, I'm wearing a white shirt, and I was thinking, I need to do this more often. Just be like, I'm in like learner mentality mode, because I think there's always something to learn in life. I also think that, you asked me at the very start of our conversation, like what's sort of happening in leadership these days that we should, like a falsehood or we should be paying attention to. And I think needing to know everything, or even knowing everything. Like leadership is not about knowing everything. It just is not. And so how do you create for yourself that space of I'm open to learning? And so for me, I've been using this term a lot lately, which is like curiosity, just like being curious about stuff, like asking questions, thinking of what could be, why did that happen? And that curiosity has led me in a lot of places, great relationships, service in my community, job opportunities, like fill in the blank. And so I have just found that being in a constant, I think you said learner mindset or like white belt mindset, or I'll say in the curiosity, has always been in service of growth and development and learning. And then the other thing I'll share with this is, if I can find it really quickly, those that are watching, or I'll just describe it. Just yesterday, I was chatting with someone. I have messy notes around it, but I was chatting with someone. And think of like a small circle, and then like a larger circle outside of it. If you were drawing it on a piece of paper, it might look like a donut for those that like me that are not ours. And the inner circle being about like where you are today, and the outer circle representing like your increased capacity, aperture, perspective through learning. And learning could be I'm reading, I'm having a conversation with someone, I've had an experience, I'm traveling. How do you get from this inner circle to outer circle? Those are the things. Those are the things that push us out. So inner circle, and then if you drew an arrow to that outer circle, those are all representative learning moments. And so for me, that is curiosity. The curiosity fuels the arrows out to the outer circles. And that's just how I think about it. That gave me like maybe a system. I'm just bringing it in for different learning styles. Like here's a framework. But for me, it's just constant exploration. I don't think about like, yes, I know that I'm a lifelong learner. I don't phrase it that way. I just think it is the pursuit of like who I am. I just always want to be learning and bettering. So that's it for me. But I think maybe hopefully that helps in a system way too, or to have a model if someone's like why does that matter? What am I doing and how do I do it? Because there's so many ways to learn. And by the way, you're probably learning without even realizing it. So one, give yourself credit. And two, remember there's always something to take away.
Absolutely. No, 100%. It's what I love most about doing these interviews, and it wasn't why I initially started the podcast, but it's what draws me to continue to do it. I started the podcast because I was looking for a new fun project. I wanted to meet new people. I wanted to highlight people that I knew that would bring motivation, inspiration, and education to the show. But really, at the end of the day, like I get excited for each and every podcast because I get this hour-long one-on-one. In my opinion, it's a learning opportunity. I'm learning a lot from you, and I hope that everybody watching, if you take notes or you're just listening, it may not hit you, today or tomorrow, but all of a sudden you'd be like a week later and be like, huh, that's what we were just talking about that, a week ago, and this is how it applies. And it's just, again, it's one of the reasons that I love the podcast and learning from others like yourself. But you brought up community service, and we haven't really touched on that a bit. Tell me a little bit more about community service, how you're involved in your community. What kinds of things are you passionate about?
So many things. I think accessibility as it relates to sport. We talked about that. I think accessibility to job and job paths is important. I think there's a common theme here around community. So I live in Baltimore, and for those that don't know much about the city, or maybe I'll demyth the city, which is it is a very strong community. Very strong community, nonprofits, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, but largely a lot of people who care about the spaces that we're in. So I'm passionate about contributing to that, whether that's just going to events, picking up the trash of the street, running a neighborhood event. But that's a part of more like who I am, and I know that I live in a community and want to contribute that way. So I'm very passionate about those things. Those are like big passions for me.
Are there any specific organizations that you belong to in your community? For example, you're talking about a lot of things that my wife and I are passionate about in our community. We have loved raising our kids in this community and being able to, just help out wherever we can. So the Moore Park Chamber of Commerce, our Moore Park Morning Rotary Club. But listen, is there any organization that you support strongly in your area?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. So I mentioned Kennedy Krieger Institute, nonprofits for me. So I serve on the advisory board for an organization called Perscolis. They're actually national, but they have local chapters. So I support the one in Baltimore for providing free IT education for folks. I also support a nonprofit called TCP Youth Empowerment, and that is about providing mentoring and experiences for youth from middle school through high school to build confidence and lifelong leadership skills. And then I also, and this is where you and I connected, I serve on the City of Baltimore Workforce Development Board. So a whole different world of government exposure and government with community. And that's been really fun. So that's where I spend that invested time.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Good for you. I know we need to wrap in just a second here, so I appreciate your time. If you could answer this last question, looking ahead, what do you believe the future of leadership will demand, and how can people start preparing for that right now?
I think the future of leadership is also now leadership and has been, which is stay curious, be that learner. I think the more you can be open to learning, be open to change and evolution, the better all of us will be, not just for continued movement in who we are as people, but the world of work is changing. And so if we're not curious, if we're not open to learning, this is where you do start to potentially get left behind or have limited options of where that mobility happens. So stay curious, stay learning, and stay connected back to the community, where we can all serve each other in learning and in pursuit of what's next, whatever that may be. So those would be things that I would leave folks with.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for all your time and just everything we talked about today. I hope that if you're watching this live or you're watching the replay, please share it with your family and friends. Share it on your profiles. Speaking of profiles, Carlee, where can people find you or connect with you? What's the best way for people to connect?
Yeah, two ways. So one, LinkedIn. So you can just look for my name. I share a lot of conversation things we've had today, but also I will take messages and respond. So always happy to connect there. And then also acenaroconsulting.com.
Excellent. All right. Sounds good. Well, again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll connect again soon and stay in touch. Guys, if you enjoyed this, one more time, please subscribe. Master Motivation Podcast on YouTube, and come back for the next one. We'll see you guys next week. Carlee, wishing you an amazing weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. All right, guys, that's it for today for Master Motivation Podcast. I'm Jason Flame, and this is Carlee Wolfe. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you on the next time. Take care. Bye-bye.